But I think one of the things that did help out was wet water. But you could only use wet water on the edges. You couldn't get in there. Needed a lot of water. As you said, John, we were all praying for rain.
What do you mean by wet water, Bill?
Well, it was a substance that would break down the molecules and penetrate right down through a lot better than just plain water.
Yeah.
It would saturate. They had used it originally in the leather factories there. Okay. And lo and behold, we had a call man that was handy in that he worked in one of the leather factories, and we'd appropriate a 5-gallon container of that once in a while to try it out to see how it worked. And one of the first places we ever used it in was a buffing box in the old leather factories. They'd have a buffing box on the outside, and you weren't supposed to smoke in the shoe factory, but if the boss was coming along, the fellow would take the cigarette and hit it into the ventilating system and would follow it down through to the buffing box on the outside where all the pulverized leather was, and sure enough, that would start smoldering and take off, and so it called for a little wet water there to penetrate.
Bob, I would imagine that one of the hardships would be a tremendous drain on the manpower at the various stations just to be out there monitoring those wood fires. Taking away the manpower.
Yeah,
from
it was a concern. Oftentimes you would have mutual aid would come in and cover your fire stations, but when it came 5 or 6 o'clock, they wanted to go home too, you know.
Sure.
So it was no, we were spread thin on many occasions when we were tied up like that.
Really. Now, were most of these fires, John, in your opinion, an act of nature, or were some deliberately set back in those years?
I got a feel that some of them were deliberately set by kids.
Kids, maybe?
Yeah. I'm not sure of that, but it's my feeling.
Yeah. Well.
Campers.
Yeah. Go ahead.
We as I told you before we went on the air, they were back in '47 down on Common Lane. Mel Jones was the deputy chief at the time, and I was attached to Engine 2. We were coming down and reporting to him. He wanted us to go to work at a certain spot, and while he's there talking to us, motorists came up and said, "Hey, you got a woods fire back down there." So lo and behold, come to find out, this fellow that was on a motorcycle, and this, of course, was before the days of the walkie-talkies or any radios at all. He was running around and relaying orders for us, but at the same time he was dropping cigarettes and packages of matches and just spreading it along. Once we collared him, why things seemed to simmer down a little bit there.
I wanted to ask you fellas, what do you do, or what did you do when you suspected perhaps there was arson involved on the scene after surveying the fire's out, and you've inspected the premises and all? What would you do, John?
To our best of our ability, we try to determine a cause by process of elimination and so forth. If we couldn't do that, we turned it over to our arson. We had an arson investigating squad. I think Deputy McPherson was the head of it at that time, and he took it up with the police department. We had a squad. Then they call in the state to help. Calling the state inspector, fire inspector to help.
But in the days before the specialist, Bob, how would they determine whether a fire was arson or not? Would there be things they'd look for?
Well, the most popular cause of fires back in the old days were rats and matches. Time after time in the fire reports, cause rats and matches.
They didn't know.
And I think they proved it in later years. They took about 10,000 wooden matches and put them with a cage of rats, and the rats never chewed on a match all the time they were in there, so that theory went down the drain. But it was a good cover-up for the local fire chief, you know. He had to come up with a cause. That seemed to satisfy the people.
But could you tell, though, by examining the debris whether or not
you can tell where a fire originates just by the characteristic of the burn. If you got a deep-seated burn, that fire's been, probably originated there.
Yep.
And You can also tell by the charring, the type of charring. A deep-seated fire will have deep chars, and a flash fire will be nothing but light brown, light burn, light charring.
And then, of course, I imagine the witnesses would play an important part too in determinations.
Yeah. Once you pinpointed the location where you think it started, you can eliminate an awful lot of, suspects.
Yeah. I know, Bill, you spent a goodly number of years chasing down various and sundry suspects.
Yes, it was Chief Palmer and Chief Arconi got together, and they appointed Bill Cowles, who was a lieutenant at the time, retired as chief, of course. And Bill and I got together and formed the first arson squad. And Bill's dad was a police officer, and my dad was a fireman. And a lot of people don't realize that for about a year, Bill Cowles was attached to Engine 2 as a call man with myself down there. But he didn't like the idea of getting into a building with all that smoke and so forth, and he decided to go to the other side and join the police force there. But the reason for forming a squad was we weren't getting that much cooperation from the state fire marshal's office at the time. And we were having a number of fires, and nothing seemed to come of it. And I've got to say that Captain John Rizzaldi joined us, and of course he was the prosecutor for the city of Beverly in the court system and so forth, and he joined us oftentimes in the interrogation of the individuals, the suspects, and thank goodness for John, because he knew the law in and out. Sure. And if we had a real sticky one, John would be down at the scene there, but he wouldn't get involved with digging right in the way Bill and I did. And but we were very fortunate. We were successful in a lot of convictions, but it was a tempered thing in that we weren't out there to persecute anyone. And there were a lot of good solutions in that some of the younger people that were setting fires, we got them help, and they later on in life went out to really make quite a name for themselves in their particular fields. And it was gratifying to see that we had put a little time and effort into helping them.
I was going to say, this all involved extra time above and beyond the normal time of duty per day. Extra hours.
Yeah, but he got paid overtime.
Yeah, that was paid overtime.
Yeah, tell us about it.
We had to do it without pay. That was work.
I can't hear a thing. You're coming through awfully distorted here.
Bob, you were talking a moment ago about matches and rats, and I know you've got a good rat story to tell us here.
Well, this is a true story.
Oh, here we go again.
It was a beautiful, warm summer day, and just below the Engine 2 firehouse where I was stationed, between Rantoul Street and Cox's Court, years ago, someone had dumped a great big pile of heavy timbers in there, full of creosote. It looked like they had torn down a wharf down there on the waterfront. It had decayed quite badly and was covered with briars and vines, and occasionally the neighbors would tell us that, they saw an occasional rat down around there. Well, this warm summer day, that pile of timber got on fire, and being creosote, it had sent up an enormous billow of black smoke, and if you were uptown and looked towards Salem, you'd think the whole lower end of Cabot Street was on fire, and this naturally drew quite a crowd. So Frankie Moss and I, we went down there, we stretched the line in, and we turned the water on, and I don't know whether it was a combination of our water or the heat from that fire, but there was more than one rat there. There were hundreds of rats, and they took off. and most of them headed for Rantoul Street where the crowd had gathered. Well, you should have seen the women hoist their skirts up and doing the two-step. Boy, I saw more flesh that day since they came out with the spring bikinis. I mean, you go to a lot of fires and, you know, they're sad and disappointing, but this was a fun fire.
It had a happy ending.
This had a happy ending.
That's good. Let's change the subject here and go back a little bit, Bill, to the... you brought along some very interesting photographs here of the old days, and we didn't quite finish them off at the beginning of the program.
Well, this photo I have here is a photo of Engine 2's crew. This is back in the 2 platoon days, and this was taken in October, late October, 1933. And this shows my father over here, an old John Cowley, and then we have Tim Brown and Captain Tom Kelly, who I've mentioned before on a couple of stories there.
The straw hat.
Yeah, with a straw hat, and Tim had the tall felt hat there.
Now,
And,
I don't want to find fault, Bill, but you said that was taken in October?
late October.
Well, what's the snow chains doing on the rear wheels? Didn't they take them off during the summer down?
No,
What were
no,
you guys doing down there in Engine 2, anyway?
Are you finding fault with this?
That's not my fire to
Now, we're looking today, this is at the corner of School Street at Rantoul, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a little pet shop in there today
Yeah.
where the old fire station used to be. And you have a couple more. We might as well get to them now, Bill,
All
before
right.
we
This,
go along here.
this one here was taken in 1950 outside the New Central Fire Station after Fireman Sunday. And this shows my father here, myself, Brother Bob, and Brother Don.
Very nice, very nice. Good family portrait there. And you brought along a series, I think maybe 2 or 3 photographs here. This was the 5-alarm fire.
This was
that we
the
referred
first 5-alarm fire under our new running schedule.
to Beverly Farms.
And this is Beverly Farms, shows Burton Hardware here. And this one here
That's a great picture there, Bill.
shows one of the fellows putting on a mask here, another fellow putting on one, and shows Chief Palmer in the background talking to myself. And later on in the day, this is Officer Bill Dwyer over talking to Chief Palmer and myself, and he had a little problem. There was a fellow with a tank truck full of gasoline that wanted to make a delivery about 100 feet down the street while we were still fighting the fire, and he couldn't understand why we wouldn't let him empty the gasoline there. Well, needless to say, he never did drop the gasoline.
Yeah. That was the first 5-alarm.
The first 5-alarm fire we had. It was a 5-alarm running card, and Bob had the first 4-alarm, which was a couple of weeks before that at the Mackerel Cove down there across the Dane Street Beach.
Where the old sea breeze used to be down.
Yeah.
Well, John, this would be a good time, I think, to bring out the 75, I believe, fire, the Baptist church fire. You know, you were the command person there, were you not?
I was. It happened late afternoon, so 3 or 4 o'clock. We got a alert signal, vocal, fire, smoke coming out of the Baptist church. When I get around about 100 yards from my station, I ordered a second alarm, because I know the type of building would burn pretty good if we get going. And when I get onto the side door, went into the building, and I ordered for the general, because I knew the fire was taking off, and you're not going to save too many church fires.
Wood building.
Wood building.
Old wood building.
So I used a defense system and tried to save the steeple, because everything was going towards the steeple. Drafts going right up there pretty fast. And I think we had about 3,000, 4,000 gallons of water per minute flowing at times in that particular fire.
Yeah. I well remember that made the Boston news headlines, and they had helicopters overhead taking aerial photographs of the fire. It was quite a scene down there. What was the determined cause of that?
I could not determine that cause.
Really?
It was and a whole room was burnt out. I didn't determine it.
Yeah.
We turned it over to the investigators
Yeah.
and the state fire marshal office, so forth.
Well, as I say, thanks to your efforts and the guys that worked on the shifts that day, that steeple today is there for us to.
That'd be my epitaph.
I should say. I should say that was quite a feat to save that big landmark that we have down on Cabot Street, Bill, from being
Very
razed.
much so. Yeah.
Were you fellows there that day?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you had the rear of that building.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had a lot of manpower through there on roofs and so forth.
Yeah.
And
Was there any danger, John, of the flames leaping across the street,
well,
maybe Abbott Street or wherever?
if that steeple collapsed, then it would have a little danger, yes.
Yeah.
It would be, could spread the fire. Somebody else get hurt, yes. There was some danger. But I kept it to a defense fire, nobody inside, because I was afraid that a roof would collapse or something like that would happen. So.
Well, as we say, the church, of course, is rebuilt today, and it's more or less of a stone structure down there today, brick, I guess it is. But the steeple, as we have always seen it, dating back, I think, to 1868 when the church was erected, is still there for us to have as a landmark downtown.
Hey, did you ever find out what caused the bell to ring?
No,
I told you the angels came down.
Yeah, the story that I heard was that you fellas were ascending the stairs to go into what was left of the building, and all of a sudden, from up above in the belfry, they started to ring.
Yeah, that was after I left, probably. Yeah.
And a mystery.
Yeah.
We'll leave it as such.
You don't want to believe the angels came down and they saw it. They felt it.
Bob, do you have a thought about that? I mean,
No.
any scientific reason why that would happen?
No. I don't think there was any bells in that steeple, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. Well,
They had it was tape
could be.
music.
Could be.
It was speakers on the outside.
Yeah. Jumping across the street.
That might have taken off, you know. It could have a short
Sure.
circuit, could have
Sure.
set that thing working.
Sure. Jumping across the street, and about 2 decades earlier, of course, we had the Beverly National Bank fire. That was in, I believe, 1954, Bill. And that took up the LB department store and the bank, and everything went on that particular day. That was a tough one, Bob, was it not?
And that was quite a fire.
Were you fellas involved down there at that time?
Yeah, I remember the alarm came in. I was at home at the time, and I drove my father up to headquarters and dropped him off. And as I was just proceeding up Essex Street, I saw the ceiling on the first floor in the bank drop down. There was a ball of fire there then, and of course it had taken off. And there was a cock loft, perhaps 14, 16 inches deep, just beneath the roof there. And the fire was traveling down through that. We had 3 or 4 big lines up on that flat roof on the back of the building there trying to hold it. And a little side story that goes with this is Chief Cressy's house was located right across the street in Federal Street. And this, of course, was before the days of when everybody had a TV set in their home and so forth. But let me tell you, he got a better view of that thing than anybody else in the city of Beverly. And there were a few of the fellows would come over to his bay window there and say, you know, what do you think, Chief? What do we do here and there? And let me tell you, he really enjoyed it. I know I met with him and my dad afterwards, and he really enjoyed it. And of course, there were a lot of the guys that came over that he hadn't seen for a few years. And
Sure.
After the fire was all over, there was, I think you'd find a little refreshment on the windowsill there with a couple of glasses. And
What type of building was that? Was that a brick building or a wooden construction?
there was brick and wood.
Bank?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
I was
had
out of
kind
town.
burn.
I was out of town on that one.
Yeah, Wittenhagen was
I don't
out
know
of.
whether it was all wood or
No,
brick or what.
it was a combination
Was it?
of both, and it burned all the way down to the end of the building where the firewall was there.
Yeah.
Helmies.
Yeah, that it went right through Elmies because Elmies had that very high ceiling in there, and they had the fellas in there with plaster hooks trying to rip that old tin ceiling down. And at one time they had 30-odd guys in the emergency room, Beverly Hospital, got overcome by smoke. Wow. Our fellas and the out-of-town fellas. Wow. And
see, and I imagine any fire that breaks out in a congested area, Bob, like downtown Cabot Street, Ellis Square, the fear has to be that it's going to jump from one building to the next.
Yeah.
And that's part of I guess the job is to be sure that nothing like that occurs, in addition to putting out the blaze itself. Again, to change the subject, Bob, for just a moment. Down at Beverly Cemetery, there's a monument down there that's dedicated to the firemen. Can you tell us how that came to be and perhaps a little bit of history?
That belongs to the Beverly Firemen's Relief Association, that association we talked about at a previous taping.
Yep.
And they erected it. And I believe any fireman that destitute and cannot afford his own burial plot, he can be buried there.
Yeah. And John, they have ceremonies down there, I guess, on a yearly basis. I see the department down there.
June, what is it, first Sunday in June?
Second
Sunday in June. They have a fireman memorial. Yeah.
Yep.
And they all turn out.
That's a nice touch, Bill, to have a monument down there.
It is.
That's a beautiful monument, too.
Is.
Nice carving on that.
Yeah. Well, let's see. We're coming down here to time. Wanted to talk about the Rogers Fire Building, but we'll do that in the next time around, Bill, because that's a story in itself. John, how about telling us now, from the top position in the fire department, the fire chief, how does the rank and file descend, and what perhaps are their duties or responsibilities?
Well, in a few words, or a book. Well, they get the top man of the fire chief. He's the CEO, chief operating officer, whatever you want to call him. There's the idea to get the money through the law and so forth. That's his job.
Yeah.
Then the chief has deputy fire chiefs, and when he's away, they assume the chief's responsibility of running the department and the manpower and the training of the personnel under him. That's short time. And then they get the captains. The captain is a fire company. He has 3 or 4 men under him, and in the station, he takes care of the station and trains his men for his apparatus and so forth. And now they have lieutenants, which is another company officer that operates under the captain and so forth. That's, in a short, that's about the line.
Yeah. And then the regular fireman, per se. Is that?
And then you have the guy to do all the work. Yeah.
And the rank and file, Bob.
The grunts.
Yeah.
Bill, would you, any comments regarding the rank and file?
No, I think that John hit the nail on the head pretty much.
You fellas, all of you worked your way right up through the various levels to become deputy fire chiefs.
Speaking of, you mentioned going up through the levels. We were just talking about the National Bank. Chief Doolin canceled a promotional examination that morning.
Right.
We were all scheduled to take a promotional examination at City Hall that morning. He called civil service up in Boston and canceled the examination.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Wow. Well, we're coming, as I say, down to our time here, and I would like to have you fellas come back for yet one more program, and we'll discuss, polish things up, and talk about, I'd like to talk with you about the modern day version of Beverly's fire department. Get your opinions on where things perhaps are today, and perhaps what new ideas and innovations could possibly come along in the near future, things of that sort. We have just a minute left here. Bob, any thoughts along those lines of things you'd like to see happen with our local department?
No, but I can leave you with an interesting story.
Please do.
I know it's a true story because I was there. It was a summer evening, around 7 o'clock at night. We had a terrific explosion in the house down in Beverly Cove. It actually blew the husband and wife right out of the house onto the front lawn.
Huh.
When I got there, this poor woman was sitting on the grass crying. I went over and put my arm around her and consoled her. I says, "Now don't cry, everything's gonna be all right." She says, "Oh, I'm not crying because I'm hurt." She says, "I'm crying because I'm so happy. This is the first Saturday in 15 years that my husband and I have been out together."
Here to you.
True story.
Okay. We can't do better than that, Joe.
I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Well, okay. Deputy Fire Chiefs John Ambrefe and Robert May and William McPherson, thanks so much again. This is our third program to sit down together, and I'm looking forward to having you gentlemen come back one more time. And as I said, we'll put the finishing touches on what I think will be a nice series of programs about our good old Beverly Fire Department and its history thereof. So thanks for coming. And this is Ed Josephs, hoping that you have been enjoying these programs with the fire chiefs, deputy fire chiefs, and we'll look forward to being with you very soon. So for now, good night.
All that I have is my grandfather's hammer, his old railroad watch in its casing all worn, and the Bible my grandmother bought her last Christmas. She gave to my mother, now she's passed it on. Some may leave money from a lifetime of saving, some just their name on a marble stone. It's not what you leave, it's the joy of remembering. All I can leave you is a handful of songs. Some may leave stories well-tuned in the telling, some just a joke that can still make you laugh. Some may leave lessons hard in the learning, some just a smile in an old photograph. Some may leave money from a lifetime of saving, some just their name on a marble stone. It's not what you leave, it's the joy of remembering. All I can leave you is a handful of songs. How many days slip away without notice? How many friends have been left on the way? How many good times are taken for granted, only remembered when they've passed away? Some may leave money from a lifetime of saving, some just their name on a marble stone. It's not what you leave, it's the joy of remembering. All I can leave you is a handful of songs. All that I have is my grandfather's hammer and his old railroad watch in its casing all worn, and the Bible my grandmother bought her last Christmas. She gave to my mother, now she's passed it on. Some may leave money from a lifetime of saving, some just their name on a marble stone. It's not what you leave, it's the joy of remembering. All I can leave you is a handful of songs.